0600 hours, South China Sea, aboard the lead U.S. aircraft carrier. The sun crests the eastern horizon, casting a deceptive golden shimmer across the endless expanse of the Pacific. On the flight deck, yellow-shirted handlers guide a fighter jet onto the steam catapult with practiced rhythmic hand signals. The smell of high-octane jet fuel and salt spray hangs heavy in the humid morning air, mixing with the aroma of fresh coffee drifting from the bridge. Sailors move with steady purpose, checking arresting cables and coiling fueling hoses in the relative cool of the early morning. The ocean is glass, disturbed only by the white wake trailing behind the massive vessel. Inside the Combat Information Center, a sudden high-pitched chime cuts through the low hum of routine conversation. A radar operator leans forward, wiping his screen, his eyes widening as he processes the data. A single green sweep reveals a dozen erratic contacts emerging from the cloud cover to the west. The contacts multiply instantly, transforming from ghost signals into solid high-velocity tracks screaming toward the fleet at supersonic speeds. The operator slams his hand on the alert button. The collision alarm blares, a jagged, tearing sound that sends adrenaline spiking through the crew. The automated defense cannons on the starboard side spin up with a high-pitched mechanical whine and vomit streams of tungsten tracers into the sky. It is not enough. The first missile slams into the carrier's hull just above the waterline, instantly vaporizing 3,000 tons of hardened steel. The impact hurls the 70,000-ton vessel sideways, throwing the flight deck crew off their feet like rag dolls. A massive fireball erupts from the lower decks, consuming the forward hangar bay in a roaring inferno of orange flame and black smoke. Another missile screams in, low over the water, detonating against the island's superstructure. The blast showers the flight deck with jagged shrapnel and molten glass. A parked fighter jet catches the blast wave, flipping over and crushing a fuel truck. The collision ignites a secondary explosion that scours the deck, incinerating everything in a 50-yard radius. Sailors scramble through the choking smoke, dragging wounded shipmates away from the spreading pools of burning jet fuel. Blood smears across the non-skid surface of the deck. The destroyer escorting the carrier takes a direct hit to its forward magazine. The ship breaks in half with a deafening crack that thunderclaps across the water. The bow lifts vertically out of the sea before crashing back down in a cauldron of boiling foam and steam. Bodies and debris rain down onto the churning water. On the carrier, the blast doors buckle under the pressure of internal explosions. Steam pipes burst, scalding the air, hissing violently as emergency lights flicker and die in the corridors. The captain stumbles to his feet on the smoke-filled bridge, blood trickling from a deep cut on his forehead. He grabs the tactical comms handset, shouting orders over the roar of the fires. He commands the remaining destroyers to initiate a hard turn and activate all electronic jamming measures immediately to confuse the targeting sensors. He orders damage control teams to seal off the lower decks to prevent the ship from capsizing. The remaining escort frigates unleash a barrage of defensive missiles, their vertical launch cells spitting fire as they try to intercept the second wave of incoming projectiles. The carrier lists heavily to port, the flight deck now a ruined landscape of twisted metal and charred composite. Thick black smoke billows into the clear morning sky, blocking out the rising sun. The ocean around the strike group is littered with burning oil and the wreckage of the defensive screen. Sirens wail endlessly across the water. The war has begun not with a declaration, but with a slaughter. 0635 hours, Andersen Air Force Base, Guam. Mist clings to the thick jungle canopy surrounding the massive dual runways. Ground crews cycle through pre-flight checks on heavy bombers, the smell of burnt kerosene mixing with the damp earth. A lone fuel truck rumbles slowly across the tarmac, its tires crunching on the concrete. The Pacific wind rustles the palm trees lining the perimeter fence, masking the distant high-altitude roar approaching from the northwest. Mechanics wipe grease from their hands, looking forward to the shift change. The base commander's coffee mug vibrates across his desk. A low, rhythmic thumping sound builds in the air, shaking the corrugated metal of the hangar roofs. The base-wide air raid siren erupts, a mournful rising wail that pierces the morning calm. A mechanic drops his wrench and looks up. The clouds part. The sky tears open. The first ballistic missile creates a shockwave that flattens the perimeter fence instantly. It slams into the main fuel depot. A mushroom cloud of fire roars upward, turning the dawn sky a violent shade of red. The ground heaves violently, knocking the ground crews off their feet. Concrete slabs fly like shrapnel, slicing through the fuselages of parked transport planes. A second missile strikes the end of runway north, gouging a crater 20 feet deep into the earth. Pilots sprint across the shaking tarmac, diving into cockpits while debris rains down around them. Engines scream to life with desperate urgency. A massive bomber taxis heavily, wings flexing as it accelerates through falling ash and burning metal. A shockwave from a nearby impact hits it. The heavy aircraft tips, dragging its wingtip along the ground until the wing snaps. The fuel tanks rupture in a blinding white flash, engulfing the aircraft. Glass shatters in the control tower. Controllers dive under consoles as the panoramic windows blow inward, spraying the room with crystal shards. Outside, a fighter jet throttles up, dodging a burning jeep. It lifts off seconds before a cluster munition peppers the runway behind it. The tarmac disintegrates into a cloud of dust and pulverized rock. Soldiers in the barracks are thrown from their bunks as the roof collapses under the pressure of a nearby blast. Fires rage uncontrolled, consuming the maintenance hangars and twisting the steel girders like plastic. The wing commander grabs the radio microphone, shouting over the sound of crumbling ceiling tiles. He orders all remaining flight-capable aircraft to scramble immediately to dispersal points. He commands the Patriot missile batteries to switch to independent targeting mode as the central radar link severs. He directs the base security forces to perimeter defense positions to guard against sabotage. The barrage ceases as quickly as it began. Thick, oily smoke blankets the island, completely obscuring the tropical sun. The surviving fighter jet climbs steeply away from the devastation, banking hard over the ocean to patrol the airspace. On the ground, firefighters drag heavy hoses toward the inferno, their silhouettes tiny against the wall of raging flames. The base is crippled, but still breathing. 07:15 hours, 50 miles west of the crippled carrier strike group. The ocean swells, gray and restless, churning under a darkened sky. Smoke from the burning carrier drifts downwind, coating the sea in a greasy haze that limits visibility to 3 miles. A line of U.S. destroyers cuts through the chop, their bow waves crashing rhythmically against steel hulls. On the bridge wings, lookouts scan the mist with high-powered binoculars, wiping salt spray from the lenses. The only sound is the deep drone of engines and the slap of water against metal. A sudden white geyser erupts 200 yards off the lead destroyer's bow. The water crashes back down. The horizon bristles with jagged shapes. A swarm of Chinese fast-attack vessels charges through the smoke, their bows lifting high out of the water as they accelerate. Behind them, heavy Chinese destroyers emerge from the fog wall. The lead U.S. destroyer's main deck gun swivels instantly. It roars. The recoil shakes the entire vessel. A shell slams into the lead attacker, blowing the small boat into splintered fragments of fiberglass and burning metal. The ocean boils with return fire. Tracers zip back and forth between the fleets like angry hornets. A Chinese frigate unleashes a volley of rockets. They scream across the water at wave-top height. One strikes the U.S. destroyer's bridge structure. Glass explodes outward. The steel plating buckles and tears open, hurling jagged shrapnel across the command deck. Fire engulfs the radar mast. Another fast boat rushes a U.S. frigate on the flank. The frigate's rotary cannon spins up with a mechanical scream. The stream of tungsten rounds shreds the attacking boat, tearing the hull apart in seconds. But a torpedo drops from a second boat just before it disintegrates. The weapon streaks through the water, leaving a bubbling white trail. It impacts the frigate's midsection. The explosion lifts the 4,000-ton ship out of the water. The keel snaps with a sickening metallic groan. The ship slams back down, lurching violently to starboard. Sailors on the deck slide helplessly across the wet steel, crashing into the railings. Water rushes into this engine room, drowning the turbines in a hiss of steam. The tactical officer on the remaining operational destroyer yells into the comms loop, his voice straining over the noise of impact alarms. He orders the helm to come hard right to unmask the aft missile batteries. He commands gunnery crews to switch to manual optical targeting as electronic warfare jams the sensors. He authorizes the release of floating decoy canisters to confuse the enemy sonar. The firing slows as the vessels drift apart. The Chinese swarm retreats into the mist, leaving a trail of burning wrecks. The U.S. frigate rolls over completely, its screws spinning helplessly in the air before slipping beneath the surface. Oil slicks spread wide, blackening the whitecaps. Debris bobs in the current. Survivors cling to floating crates, gasping for air in the oily, blood-streaked water. The screen is broken. 900 hours, 400 feet below the surface, South China Sea. The ocean here is a void of crushing black pressure. The U.S. attack submarine hangs motionless in the dark water, a silent steel predator. Inside the pressure hull, the air smells of recycled oxygen and ozone. Crewmen in blue coveralls sit hunched over consoles, their faces bathed in the crimson glow of battle lighting. No one speaks. The only sound is the faint rhythmic thrum of the reactor cooling pumps. A bead of sweat drips from the sonar operator's nose onto his keyboard. He does not wipe it away. On the green waterfall display, a thick white line appears. Then another. The operator taps the glass. He signals the captain with 2 fingers. A heavy convoy moves above them. The propellers of massive transport ships churn the water, creating a chaotic acoustic footprint. The captain gives a sharp hand signal. Tubes 1 and 2 flood with a rush of water. Compressed air hisses. 2 heavy torpedoes eject from the bow. They accelerate instantly, their propellers spinning into a blur, trailing copper guidance wires behind them like umbilical cords. Above, the lead Chinese transport ship plows through the swells, its deck laden with armored vehicles. It never sees the wake. The first torpedo strikes amidships, 10 feet below the waterline. The explosion lifts the freighter's center violently. The steel hull groans and snaps in two. Seawater rushes into the cargo hold with the force of a tsunami. Heavy tanks slide off the tilting deck, crashing through the railings and plunging into the dark abyss. The second torpedo hunts the trailing supply vessel. It slams into the stern. The propeller shaft shatters. The engine room disintegrates in a flash of steam and oil. The ship drops like a stone, dragging its crew down with it. The escorting Chinese destroyer spots the launch transient. It turns sharply, its sonar pinging aggressively. Depth charges roll off the stern rack. They sink. One detonates. The shockwave hammers the submarine. The hull rings like a struck bell. Light bulbs pop in the control room. A high-pressure pipe bursts, spraying hydraulic fluid across the navigation table. Men grab railings to stay upright as the deck tilts 20 degrees. The captain grips the periscope handles, his knuckles white. He barks the order to cut the guidance wires immediately. He commands a steep dive to the thermal layer to mask their acoustic signature. He orders the release of a knuckle noisemaker to mimic the sound of a turning propeller and fool the enemy sensors. The submarine slips deeper into the cold dark. Above, the depth charges explode harmlessly against the false target, sending plumes of water into the air. The ocean surface is now a debris field of floating crates and oil. The hunter vanishes. 1100 hours. Northern Philippine Sea. The gray cloud cover begins to break, revealing patches of harsh blue sky. A combined naval task force cuts through the heavy swells, moving in a tight wedge formation. A British destroyer leads the spearhead, its tall radar mast spinning rhythmically. Flanking it to starboard, a Japanese destroyer plows through the whitecaps, its vertical launch cells sealed and ready. Signal flags snap violently in the stiff wind. The ocean stretches out, empty and menacing. On the bridge of the British vessel, officers speak in clipped, calm tones, watching the tactical display link data between the two navies. A red icon flashes on the main screen, then 10, then 50. A wave of Chinese attack aircraft crests the horizon, dropping low to merge with the sea clutter. They release a volley of anti-ship cruise missiles. The weapons drop from the wings, ignite their boosters, and streak toward the Allied fleet at Mach speed. The Japanese destroyer reacts instantly. The forward deck hatches flip open, white smoke vents violently. A dozen interceptor missiles erupt from the silos, riding columns of fire into the sky. They arch over the fleet, trailing thick smoke. The sky fills with thunder. The interceptors collide with the incoming cruise missiles 3 miles out. Bright orange flashes pepper the air. Debris rains down into the ocean, splashing harmlessly around the hulls of the steaming ships. The British commander leans over the tactical table. He grabs the handset. He orders the task force to engage the surface contacts hiding behind the air cover. He authorizes the immediate release of long-range anti-ship missiles. He directs the Japanese escort to maintain an air defense umbrella over the firing group. The British frigates in the rear echelon turn their bows. Canisters on the decks angle upward. Harpoon missiles blast out of their tubes, shedding their booster stages and dropping to wave-top height. They skim the water, invisible to radar, hunting the enemy fleet. 10 miles away, the Chinese heavy cruiser attempts a hard turn. It is too slow. The first harpoon smashes into the bridge. The command center evaporates in a cloud of glass and pulverized steel. The radar mast topples forward, crushing the forward gun turret. A second missile strikes the waterline. The explosion buckles the hull plates. Seawater floods the engine compartments instantly. The cruiser lists sharply to port. Smoke pours from the shattered superstructure, choking the sailors scrambling on the tilted deck. Secondary explosions ripple through the ammunition stores, blowing huge sections of the deck plating into the air. The ship groans, a deep metallic sound of dying steel before rolling onto its side. The Allied fleet pushes forward through the smoke of the burning wreck, guns tracking for the next target. 1300 hours, 30,000 feet above the South China Sea. The sky is a piercing, limitless blue. The sun glares off the polycarbonate canopy of the lead U.S. fighter jet. Inside the cockpit, the pilot breathes rhythmically, the oxygen regulator clicking softly with each inhalation. Below, the ocean is a flat, motionless sheet of azure, broken only by scattered cloud formations far beneath the wings. The Allied formation moves in a silent, deadly V-shape, silver arrowheads hanging in the void. The radar warning receiver screams. A jagged digital tone pierces the pilot's helmet. On the heads-up display, red boxes snap onto distant specks. The enemy flight closes at a closure rate of Mach 2. The flight leader breaks silence. The first missile drops from the rail, ignites, and streaks away on a pillar of white smoke. The Chinese formation scatters instantly. A Chinese fighter jet pulls a vertical climb, engines glowing blue with afterburner heat. An Allied missile tracks it. The explosion shears the tail section off. The enemy jet spins flatly, disintegrating into a cloud of burning aluminum and composite confetti. Two Chinese fighters merge with the U.S. wingman. It becomes a knife fight. Cannons roar, the vibrations shaking the airframes. Tracers sow the sky with lines of smoke. A U.S. jet takes a hit to the right intake. Thick black smoke pours out. The pilot pulls the ejection handle. The canopy blows away. The rocket seat fires him into the thin air, a small figure suspended against the blue. The abandoned jet rolls over and plunges toward the clouds below. The squadron commander yells into his oxygen mask, his voice tight against the G-forces. He orders the flight to split into pairs to bracket the remaining bandits. He commands them to dump external fuel tanks for maximum maneuverability. He directs the second element to bypass the dogfight and engage the enemy radar plane hanging back in the distance. A British fighter jet locks onto a bandit attempting to flee. The enemy pilot dumps flares, bright magnesium stars burning hot in the day. The heat-seeking missile ignores them. It slams into the Chinese cockpit. The aircraft bursts into a fireball, tumbling end over end before breaking apart. The sky clears of threats. Silence returns to the high altitude, replaced only by the wind. Long trails of white smoke crisscross the atmosphere like scars. Debris rains down toward the ocean, miles below. The surviving jets bank hard, regrouping in formation, their fuel gauges low. 15:30 hours, unnamed strategic atoll, Central Pacific. The tropical sun beats down on the white coral sand, baking the earth until it radiates heat like an open oven. Inside the reinforced sandbag bunkers, U.S. Marines wait. Sweat soaks through to their camouflaged uniforms, turning the fabric dark and heavy. Flies buzz incessantly around the firing slits. The air smells of wet earth, gun oil, and the rotting stench of low tide. A young machine gunner wipes salt from his eyes, his grip tightening on the spade handles of his weapon. The turquoise lagoon is calm, the water lapping gently against the pristine shore. A low mechanical growl disturbs the heat haze on the horizon. It deepens into a roar. Flat-bottomed Chinese landing craft emerge from the glare, churning the water into white foam as they race toward the beach. Their ramps are up, shielding the infantry inside. They hit the reef, engines straining, and push over into the shallows. The first craft grounds on the sand with a wet crunch. The heavy steel ramp drops with a clang. The platoon sergeant screams the command to fire. The tree line erupts. 3 heavy machine guns open up simultaneously. The sound is a deafening, continuous rip that tears the air apart. Bullets hammer into the open ramp of the lead landing craft. The first squad of Chinese soldiers rushes out. They run straight into a wall of lead. Bodies jerk violently and crumple into the knee-deep surf. The water turns red instantly. A second landing craft hits the beach 50 yards to the left. Soldiers pour out, diving behind coral heads. They return fire. Green tracers zip into the palm trees, shredding bark and leaves. A Marine in the forward foxhole takes a round to the shoulder. He spins backward, collapsing into the dirt. A Navy corpsman crawls forward, dragging his medical kit through the sand, shouting for cover fire. A Marine anti-tank team pops up from a spider hole. The gunner levels a rocket launcher. He squeezes the trigger. The backblast kicks up a cloud of dust. The rocket streaks across the beach and slams into the engine block of an approaching landing craft. The fuel tanks ignite. The vessel explodes in a blinding flash of orange fire and black smoke. Metal fragments rain down on the beach, clattering against helmets. The hull blazes fiercely, trapping the crew inside. The company commander grabs the handset of the field radio. He yells over the cacophony of explosions. He orders the mortar section to drop their elevation and walk the rounds into the surf zone. He commands the heavy weapons squad to shift fire to the right flank to stop a breakthrough attempt. He directs the reserve squad to plug the gap in the perimeter. Mortar rounds begin to fall. Whump, whump, whump. They detonate in the shallow water. throwing geysers of sand and spray 30 feet into the air. Shrapnel whistles through the smoke. The attacking force falters. Soldiers scramble back toward the surviving boats, dragging their wounded. The machine guns do not stop. They chew up the sand, chasing the retreating figures. The engine of the lead boat revs high as it tries to back off the beach. It gets stuck. A grenade lands inside the open troop bay. The explosion muffles inside the steel box. Smoke pours out. Silence slowly returns to the beach, broken only by the crackle of burning fuel and the rhythmic wash of red-tinged waves. The assault is broken. Smoking husks of landing craft litter the shoreline like beached whales. Marines slump against the sandbags, changing hot barrels, waiting for the next wave. 1800 hours, high over the South China Sea. The sky has deepened into a bruised purple as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the cloud deck. Far below, the ocean is a dark, indistinct void. Two massive U.S. strategic bombers glide through the thin, freezing air, their long wings flexing slightly in the turbulence. They are flanked by a tight escort of fighter jets, their engines glowing like small, angry stars in the twilight. Inside the bomber's cockpit, the flight deck is silent, save for the rhythmic clicking of the navigation computer and the low hum of the life support systems. The air is dry and smells of static electricity. The target appears on the synthetic aperture radar, an artificial island bristling with concrete runways, radar domes, and missile silos, sits like a fortress in the middle of the dark sea. The navigator inputs the final coordinates. The bomb bay doors cycle open with a heavy mechanical groan, exposing the payload to the rushing wind. The commander barks the release order. A dozen long-range precision missiles drop from the rotary launchers. They fall for a second before their rocket motors ignite, bathing the underside of the bomber in a brilliant white glare. The missiles pitch over, accelerating toward the island at hypersonic speeds. On the island below, the alarm sirens are silenced by the first impact. The primary runway disappears in a series of massive, overlapping explosions that gouge deep craters into the reinforced concrete. Secondary blasts ripple through the underground fuel bunkers, sending a pillar of fire 500 feet into the air. The radar installation, a giant white dome, disintegrates as a missile slams directly into its center, spraying shards of composite material across the base. Anti-aircraft fire erupts from the perimeter, a desperate wall of tracers reaching toward the sky, but the bombers are already turning away. A missile silo on the north end of the island takes a direct hit. The stored fuel and warheads detonate in a chain reaction that levels every building within 3 blocks. The ground heaves so violently that the control tower snaps at its base, toppling into the burning remains of a hangar. The mission commander watches the battle damage assessment on his monitor. He orders the escort fighters to engage a pair of enemy interceptors rising from a secondary mainland base. He commands the second bomber to shift its aim to the naval pier to prevent any remaining ships from escaping. He directs the electronic warfare officer to increase the jamming intensity to maximum to mask their exit. The island is no longer a base, it is a funeral pyre. Huge plumes of black, oily smoke billow upward, merging with the evening clouds. The remaining missiles find their marks, methodically dismantling the harbor facilities. Cranes collapse into the water, and patrol boats moored at the docks are vaporized. The bombers bank hard toward the east, their mission complete. Behind them, the horizon is lit by the orange glow of the dying fortress. The sky is empty again, the roar of the engines fading into the cold, high-altitude silence. 2100 hours, South China Sea aboard a crippled Chinese command ship. The moon is a thin, pale sliver hidden behind a thick veil of low-hanging sea fog. The massive vessel lists 5 degrees to starboard, its engines dead, drifting like a ghost through the light chop. Fires smolder in the aft section, casting a rhythmic, hellish orange pulse against the rolling mist. Below decks, the hull groans as seawater sloshes through ruptured bulkheads. The air is thick with the smell of scorched insulation, chemical fire retardant, and the metallic tang of blood. The only sounds are the distant hiss of steam and the mournful creak of swaying light fixtures. A black inflatable boat glides silently alongside the hull, its motor cut. 6 Navy SEALs in wet, matte black gear attach a pneumatic climbing grapnel to the railing. They ascend the hull like shadows, moving with fluid mechanical precision. The first SEAL crests the rail, his suppressed rifle scanning the deck. He signals. The team rolls over the side and melts into the darkness of the superstructure. The team reaches the heavy steel door of the primary bridge. A SEAL places a small, shaped breaching charge on the hinges. Pop! The door stutters open. 2 flashbangs are hurled inside. They detonate with a blinding white crack that shatters the remaining glass in the bridge windows. The SEALs flood the room. Close quarters combat erupts instantly. A Chinese officer lunges for a sidearm. A burst of fire from a suppressed rifle catches him in the chest, hurling him back against a tactical console. Sparks shower the floor as bullets shred the sensitive electronics. The room is filled with the acrid smell of cordite and the screams of the wounded. A SEAL pivots, slamming the butt of his rifle into a sailor's face, then spins to cover the rear bulkhead. The deck is slick with oil and blood. The team leader slams a portable drive into the main mainframe port. He barks orders over the encrypted comms, his voice a low, urgent whisper. He commands the rear guard to set claymore mines in the corridor to block reinforcements. He orders the technician to prioritize the extraction of the fleet's encrypted communication codes. He directs the medic to zip-tie the surviving officers for extraction. The computer screen flickers. A progress bar crawls across the display. Outside in the hallway, a heavy explosion rocks the ship. The SEAL rearguard opens fire as Chinese Marines charge down the narrow, smoke-filled companionway. The sound of rapid-fire gunshots echoes through the steel hallways like hammer blows. The drive chime sounds complete. The team leader rips the drive out and signals the withdrawal. They move toward the extraction point on the flight deck, leapfrogging through the smoke. They hurl a final thermite grenade into the computer core, the white-hot flare melting the processors into a puddle of slag. The team reaches the deck and disappears over the side just as a heavy machine gun begins to chew up the railing. The boat engines roar to life in the darkness and the SEALs vanish into the fog. Behind them, the command ship is a hollowed-out wreck, its brain dead, its secrets stolen. 0600 hours, Day 2, South China Sea. The first light of dawn bleeds across the horizon, a bruised purple and gray that reveals the true scale of the devastation. The air is no longer fresh. It is a choking mixture of heavy fuel oil, burnt plastic, and the cold metallic scent of a graveyard. The ocean, once turquoise, is now a stagnant expanse of black slicks and bobbing white debris. A thick, low-hanging mist clings to the water, partially obscuring the silhouettes of the survivors. The only sound is the rhythmic, haunting thud of a rescue helicopter's rotors and the distant, lonely clang of a bell from a capsizing hull. The remnants of the Chinese fleet turn toward the mainland. The vessels are jagged ruins of their former selves, listing heavily, their superstructures twisted and blackened by fire. They move at a crawl, trailing long ribbons of thick smoke that smudge the morning sky. The U.S. and Allied Armada sits 10 miles out, a wall of steel and resolve. They do not pursue, but their guns remain tracked on the retreating shapes. The lead carrier, though scorched and battered, has stabilized. On its flight deck, crewmen in charred jerseys work in silence, pushing the wreckage of destroyed planes into the sea to clear space for arriving medevac choppers. A U.S. destroyer moves slowly through the debris field. On the deck, sailors use long gaffs to pull floating survivors from the water. The rescued men, coated in thick black oil, shiver violently despite the humid air, their eyes wide and vacant. A medic kneels on the deck, pressing a bandage to a sailor's mangled leg as blood pools in the scuppers. Officers on the bridge watch the Chinese retreat through binoculars, their faces grim and lined with exhaustion. They have won the day, but the cost is etched into the sinking wrecks around them. The fleet admiral stands at the center of the flag bridge, hands clasped behind his back. He barks an order to maintain a 24-hour combat air patrol over the entire sector. He commands the hospital ships to move forward and begin mass casualty triage. He directs the lead destroyers to establish a defensive perimeter around the salvage tugs as they begin the grueling task of towing the crippled vessels. A search and rescue helicopter hovers over a floating life raft, its downwash whipping the oily water into a frenzy. A diver drops into the sea, disappearing beneath the surface before emerging with a wounded pilot in his arms. The winch whines as it pulls them toward the safety of the cabin. The sun finally clears the horizon, shining a harsh, revealing light on the empty ocean. The Chinese fleet vanishes into the western haze, leaving behind only the dead and the burning. The Allied task force holds the line, a scarred but standing sentinel over the contested waters. The immediate fire is out, but the world has changed forever in the span of 24 hours.